Ladies and gentlemen, very good morning, very good afternoon, good evening, and once again, a very warm welcome to the day two of the Coaching Conclave 2020, powered by X-Monks. We all know that the Coaching Conclave is an initiative by X-Monks. X-Monks, where we bring in world-class coaches, world-class leaders who are doing some meaningful work in their life for personal transformation and leadership development. X-Monks is also an international partner to Ericsson Coaching International and the Leadership Circle. For the ones who have been with us since morning, and I hope you are enjoying these amazing sessions. And for the ones who have just joined us, please get ready for another fantastic session. And I'm Preeti, once again, your host for the session. I head the coaching practice for X-Monks in India, and I'm a credentialed coach as ACC by International Coach Federation. Let me take this opportunity and bring to you the world of our next speaker, Mr. Peter Merry, a human being, social innovator, author, speaker, global activist, leader, consultant, trainer, innovator, human ecologist, philosopher, father, folk singer, theater director, rugby trainer, husband, energy worker, etc., etc., etc. So the list goes on and on and on. So Peter wears a number of hats. He is a Chief Innovation Officer at Ubiquity University and the co-founder of the Ubiverse. He's also a fellow of the Center for Human Ecology in the UK, where he did his MSc with a thesis on the future of work and economics. He has a PhD at Ubiquity University's Wisdom School and completed 4 years of vocational training in ecotherapy in 2012. He had his first book, Evolutionary Leadership, published in Dutch in 2006 and in English in 2009, and is a popular public speaker. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Mr. Peter Merry to take us through this learning journey to understand the essence of coaching from the field. The session is for 50 minutes, which will have 10 minutes of question and answers. Mr. Peter Merry, many thanks for being here with all of us. We're really honored, and it's a pleasure to have you here. So over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Priti. It's an honor to be here as well. And hello to everybody around the world who may be tuning in now or any time in the future, indeed. So I'm going to share my screen here. So coaching from the field. Well, it's actually an exciting moment for me as well. Because you are the first group I am publicly sharing a preview with of my upcoming book, Leading from the Field, which this session is based on. So this has been brewing for a while. It's due out 26th of November. This is the first time I've had the graphics and everything all together to be able to share with a public audience. So it's a bit of a premiere here for me and for you. So there's a certain assumption behind this talk. And that assumption is that the reality as we experience it is a lot more than all we can see. And this, of course, we're used to thinking about if we look at the light spectrum. In this example, kind of science is happy to accept that there's a certain amount of light that we can see, and there's a certain amount of light that we can't see. But what the new science is really telling us about the nature of reality is that's the same in other dimensions as well. So in fact, that everything is information, and that there is more dense information that we can see, like at the center of the light spectrum. And then there's less dense or more subtle information that we can't see, but is actually what is coming into form. So it's literally information. And as those waves, information waves, start to cohere, they click in at some point into standing waves, and that's when the reality that we can normally experience with most of our senses appears. However, as we know, the scientists accept that they can only explain about 4 or 5% of reality, and they explain the rest away by calling it dark energy and dark matter, simply because they don't really get it. but we're starting to discover with the new leading edge science that integrates both relativity theory and quantum theory, that actually we can start to understand more of that reality. And it's ultimately just like the light spectrum, one spectrum of information. So the question becomes, how do we start to work more consciously with the parts of the spectrum of reality that are not accessible to our normal five senses? This is the way I make sense of it for people. So at one level, we have the material reality that most of us are used to, that we can see around us. But as all of you will know as coaches, there is also the question of relationships between people. And we know that when we get the relationships between people right in an organization, when they're authentic relationships, honest relationships, the energy is flowing between them, then the material architecture manifests far more gracefully as well. The productivity increases, revenue increases, there's less stress in the organization. So we have a level of relational architecture which we can't see, but we can feel the quality of the relationship. And then beyond that, we have what I call the energetic architecture, which is composed of these information waves, essentially. And if we can learn to create coherent energetic architecture, then we find that the relationships start to clear up in the organization and the system, and that at the material level, the organization performs more successfully. So what we're going to be focusing on in this talk is what it takes to coach a leader to be able to work consciously with the energetic architecture of their organization or system. So this is the kind of way, in a way, our world is starting to look if we listen to the new science at every level, be it from a galactic level right down to the cellular Planck level. It's more these toroidal forms of dynamics that are pulsing in and out. That is fractal in the sense that these patterns exist both at large systemic level as well as in us. So when we come to start to see our reality like this, we understand it's not just the stuff we can see, but there's a whole dimension to reality that we can start to work consciously with. And this isn't just a nice idea. This is actually something that was researched at Princeton University's engineering department for 28 years by Bob Jahn, who was an actual rocket scientist, and Brenda Dunn, where they were noticing, the reason they started to do this research is that they were noticing that the pilots in rockets were starting to influence the instruments on their dashboards through their inner state. So as they started to get more stressed, they were influencing these very subtle instruments on the dashboard. And that's what triggered the research. How can it be that without any physical relationship between us and the world around us, that we are somehow managing to influence it? So at Princeton, they spent 28 years researching this, looking at how human intention can impact otherwise random events. And they proved beyond statistical doubt, so it's 1 in a billion, that what they discovered was chance, that human intention, wherever you are in the world, so they had people on the other side of the world trying to influence equipment in the Princeton lab. They're even outside of time, so people influencing things retroactively in time, that they were able to change what were otherwise random events. You can see the kind of apparatus at the bottom left. Here's what they were using based on random event generators. And then a company afterwards, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, but which we're hopefully going to revive, created these lamps. I have one sitting here on my desk that you can influence the color of through your intention. And I can tell you the people who can do it most effectively are my kids, because they just come in and they say, I want the lamp to be red. Boom, it turns red. So we start to get a direct experience of how the way we think and feel actually influences the world around us, which of course the ancient wisdom traditions have talked about for many years, but that our science is only just starting to catch up with. But the key is that it helps our rational mind to accept that we are living in a deeply interconnected world. So the principles that I'm going to share with you come from about 30 years of work on large scale energetics. So this was originally called ecotherapy and was then rebranded eco-intention. And this is work that works with the energy and information fields of organizations and of large pieces of land. So this has all been proven scientifically to have an impact. They've worked, for example, with Mikhail Gorbachev in Russia in a large natural park. They had the Academy of Sciences come and measure the impact. It's like, for those who know Reiki and things like that, it's kind of like that. You have to imagine healing a forest or a large piece of land or even an organization at a distance. I'm not going to go into detail about that practice for now. I'll show you how you can find out more towards the end. But part of what developed there was how to coach the people who are leading those institutions, so either in charge of these natural parks or running these organizations or departments. In fact, anything with a boundary or a name has an energetic architecture to it, and there's somebody who's ultimately accountable or responsible for that. Now, the way that that person thinks about their system, engages with it, with their mind, with their intention, and with their emotions, affects the quality of the relationships in that field and the way that it manifests its goals. So what we're going to go into now are particularly the how you coach a leader to be able to work constructively within that energetic architecture, create more coherence energetically in the field of the system, so that the rest self-organizes itself more gracefully. Just to show you, as they've researched it in organizations, these were the average results over time that showed clear statistically significant impact in the organizations that eco-intention practitioners worked with. So this becomes the question: how do you coach somebody to lead from the field, which is what I call this, when you're actually engaging consciously with a broader spectrum of reality than just the material reality that we can see, or even just the relational reality that we can experience, but a more subtle dimension of reality beyond that. So 12 key principles that we can work with. As we go through these, you'll see that there's a word for the principle, there's a short description, and there's an image. And those images I had made especially by an artist who is able to also tune in to the feeling of the principle and create a piece of art that helps you to resonate with the principle in a way that goes beyond your cognition. So you can listen to what I'm saying, but you can also tune in to the artwork, which will give you a deeper sense of resonance with the principle we're talking about that goes beyond purely your cognitive understanding. So the first principle here is boundaries. Know the boundaries of your leadership. Energy and information needs to come into a container to be able to work and be effective. So the clearer the boundaries of that container, the more effectively that energy and information can do its work. If the boundaries aren't clear, it's like a river without banks. It's like the information, it just starts to spread around and there's no directionality or coherence to it. So what are the goals we're trying to achieve here? What are the limits? What are the areas that this leader is accountable and responsible for? Is that completely clear? Who is accountable to them? Who is this leader accountable to? So getting clarity on those boundaries is really important, because then you know what you're talking about when you use the name of the organization or the department or the project. It has a clear resonance with a specifically defined context within which the information and energy can manifest. Stillness. Now, the reason this is important for energetic stewardship is that our rational mind is able to work with the material architecture, because that's where things are divided into pieces. There's separation, there's clarification of this, and then there's that. But to be able to access the informational and energetic architecture, you can't use your rational mind. You have to be able to access your intuitive mind, or you could say your right brain. And to do that, you have to be able to quieten your rational mind. That means you have to be able to still it, to be able to go inside, allow the chatter to fade away, and be able to connect from that inner place to the field of your organization. So it's not possible to connect to the informational energetic level through the rational mind. So you have to coach people in that, coming into the stillness inside of them to be able to access that informational realm. And what you'll notice is that if you are picking up information through those through that practice, that if you try to then engage your rational mind, you lose the information, that the two can't work in parallel. So if you're working with your intuitive knowing and picking up information intuitively, you have to make a quick note of it and stay in your intuitive space. And then afterwards, when you come out, go back, look at your notes, and then allow the rational mind to do the analysis. So one of the things that's been clearly shown, particularly through the Princeton work, is that the intention that you hold about something, the image you have, the feeling you have about a possible future for your organization or initiative impacts the likelihood of it manifesting. Now, it's not as simple as a cause-effect relationship that we do see in more the material rational world. What you're doing is you're increasing probability. So when we talk about quantum, we're always talking about probabilities, because there's all sorts of other things, of course, pulling on that information, different things having an effect. So we also have to be slightly humble in our work here, but we do know that intention does affect the reality around us. So it's important for your leaders that you're coaching, for the teams that you're coaching, to have a clear intention for where they want to be going together, the goals that they have. And if you've worked with intention, what you'll know is the simple practice is connecting to the goal and then feeling how it would be for that reality to actually be true. So you put people, invite them to go into the future, to maybe even talk about it in the present tense as if it were true, and then to notice how it feels. Now, this is important because all the research shows that it's the heart connection, the emotional connection and energy around an intention that increases its likelihood of manifestation. For example, the work they were doing at Princeton, they found that couples who had a relationship were more effective at transferring information between each other. They also found that when you had a group that was aligned around a shared purpose, it increased exponentially the impact that that group was having on the otherwise random data. So intention is a critical point here, and it has to be more than just rational. This is the key thing. So on the one hand, you're holding this image of the future, but you have to then let it go. So this is part of an intention practice, that you upload it, you feel how it would be, you feel gratitude for the fact that it is that way, and then you let it go for life to manifest it in whatever way is appropriate. And that's why presence is so important, because you don't want to be attached to that vision of the future. Being attached to the vision of the future is just the same as being attached to something in the past. It takes you out of the present, which means you're not available to pick up any suggestions or tips that life brings to you, hints about how you can move in that direction. That's why presence is important. And the idea of playfulness, that you're waiting to see what shows up. You're allowing the creativity to be there. Be ready to be surprised about what shows up. One of the things that's very clear when you're doing energy work, that it's, if you're trying really hard to do something, it doesn't work. It's like, you know, things don't flow when you're like this and contracted. It's when you start to relax and smile and feel an inner smile, that things start to flow. So amusement, fondness, which is the heart energy. Somebody said to me once, one of my teachers, it's like you have to imagine you're watching a small puppy play. It's that kind of energy that enables energy to flow. So coaching them, yes, to be clear on an intention, but also importantly, to then let it go and trust that life will manifest it in the way that is most appropriate. That, by the way, there is no way you can know, because the complexity is far too great. There's far too many things going on for you to be able to know and try to control and plan your way into the future. So that management style of predict and control, it's history. We need to forget it, let it go. It's just not the way life works, because if you try to plan and control your way forward, you take one step, the world has changed, your plan is out of date, and you spend the next 5 years stressing because reality doesn't match your plan. So the key is to upload the intention, keep clear on the vision, keep the feeling around the vision, but then keep bringing yourself back to the present moment, because you'll begin to see how the synchronicities start to show up. But if you're not paying attention, if you're not at the platform when the train pulls in, you'll miss the train. And life will kind of bring it around again. But presence is about being with what's there now so that you can engage with it creatively. We talked about boundaries as the first principle. Well, when you've got a clear picture of the system that you're working with, it's very important that you pay attention to all different parts of the system. So you need to make sure that whoever it is you're coaching maybe doesn't have an allergy to one department or one part of their organization or someone in their organization, and they're choosing to ignore them. Because if you don't direct your attention somewhere, then you don't direct life energy there either, and it will start to stagnate. And what happens when a system stagnates is it starts to draw energy from the rest of the system. It becomes a kind of shadow side of the system. So even if it's a challenging thing, even if there's conflict there, you need to be able to show up, give it attention, open your heart to it, and see what's there and engage with it. So pay attention to all parts of the system that they are leading, because that attention is what directs the life force. So on the one hand, intentionality feels more of a mind activity, which it is, although you do have to connect the heart feeling to it. But what's also really important is to be able to engage with your heart in the system that you're leading, to feel what's alive in people. These are people in your organization. So how you coach the leaders to be able to engage with their people, as humans, to have a chat about what's going on at home. What are they feeling? What are they feeling about the way things are now? And to be able to hold any of that feedback in the light of your compassion. So to be able to suspend judgment, not to pass judgment on the way people are feeling about things. And to notice that any tension that's in a system should be seen as information, not to be closed down and resolved as soon as you can, but to be explored and deepened if necessary, to find out if this person is holding a tension. It's not personal, it's systemic. There's information that they're holding about the system that you as a leader need to be able to discover. What is going on there? What is the information that is in this tension in the organization right now? And to be able to have somebody share that, you need to be able to connect with them through your heart so that they feel safe sharing that information. Otherwise, you lose the information and part of your dashboard of indicators stops functioning. So this one may seem obvious, but increasingly we have people coming into management who are brought in because they're meant to be good managers or meant to be people managers, and actually have no idea of the content that people are working on. If it's a shoe factory, they have no idea about shoe production. Well, it's really important that they start to learn about it and that they're actively interested in the content of what people are working on, because those people, that's what their passion is. That's the thing they're doing. That's the content is what they want to be there for. This is their expertise. And so it's important that the leader shows interest in the subject matter that the person is an expert in, and doesn't just see it as a kind of technical job to manage people, but also really connects to the content of what is going on. That's what grounds the attention, grounds the intention. So when a leader walks around the organization, talks to people, engages with them on what they're doing, they're bringing the intentions into the organization, connecting them to those people on those locations, which is grounding the energy. It's not just enough to have the intention. You have to pull it into reality. And that means actually connecting through your heart, through your mind, with the people, with the content of what this system is about. An organization is a living system. It has its purpose, it has its goals. So if you're being interested in those, is critical to be able to increase the likelihood of those goals actually manifesting. Now, this is often a sensitive one, but as coaches, I'm sure you'll be familiar with. So often, if there's something blocking in a system, in an organization, then it's to do with something that's happened in the past that hasn't been resolved, that hasn't been integrated. Particularly when an organization is trying to take a next step forward. It's like a tree. When a tree wants to send its branches higher up into the sky, it has to dig its roots deeper. And when you dig your roots deeper, you come up against the hard stuff in the past, right? So as an organization wants to evolve, it can't just shoot into the future without checking if there's any energy held in the past which is needed for it to be able to take that next step. So to be sensitive to, particularly around founders of organization, how was the founder treated? Are there any issues there? Anybody who's familiar with constellations work, organizational constellations, for example, it's a very good way of dealing with these issues. What is showing up? What is pulling on the energy of the organization? And normally it's some kind of pain or trauma somewhere in the past that needs to be engaged and reintegrated so that that energy becomes available for the organization to take its next step. Yeah, this is one that's still more alive in the East than it is in the West, but a recognition that place on the earth has energy and information to it. So the earth isn't just a block of concrete that you can just drop anything down on and do anything there. It has its own life, its own identity. And so making sure you're conscious of where you locate buildings, the way you organize things, is critical. Otherwise, you suddenly find weird things going on, and you don't understand why. So make sure that as we consider where we do things, that we take into account that where is alive, that it's got an awareness, that there are existing energies, informations, maybe things also held there from the past that need to be taken into account of. So remember to have a relationship to place, not just see it as some material object that we're going to do an activity on or build an office on. Same with how we use our language and our numbers and the shapes that we actually build things in. Everything in proportions creates certain energy dynamics. So start to learn a little bit more about how geometry, number, language, how that actually influences things. What we call things is critical. You know, the names we give people, the names we give roles, the names we give organizations, they all have a certain frequency or resonance that will attract an equivalent resonance. It's like a piano, you know, where a name, you bang a key on the piano and then a number of the other strings in the piano resonate with that key. Well, that's like a name. That's like a number. Well, that's like a certain shape. So becoming more conscious of those aspects and how we name things, how we design things, how that's going to influence the energy and information in the system is another critical thing that you can help leaders to work with consciously. timing. This is a tricky one, because often we make a plan and we set milestones that we want to achieve things, and then we drive towards those milestones. Well, what we forget is the 96% of reality that the scientists say we don't know about. So what happens if stuff is going on in that 96% of reality that isn't aligned with the goal we've set ourselves? Well, we spend our lives stressing because we're not meeting that goal. We don't understand why not. Why is that person not performing? Why are we not getting there? And we lose touch with the present moment because we've got ourselves attached to something in the future, which is the achievement of a certain goal by a certain moment in time. So time has its rhythms. Time flows in certain ways, and there are certain other things going on that we have no control over. So the more attached we get to achieving something by a certain point in time and frustrated that we're not getting there, the less likely we are to achieve it. So pay attention to when things seem to be flowing, then put our attention there, encourage it to move. When it blocks, pay attention to it as well, but don't try to force it. It's an information, it's a piece of information. Oh, why have things got stuck here? Let's be curious about that. Let's open our hearts and explore what's actually going on there, because that'll hold the information that will enable things to come back into flow. If you try to force something through at that point, you'll just get greater pushback, increasing stress, and likely to create a problem that's just going to get bigger. And that's related to this one, which is a beautiful principle because it keeps you in the present, which is just pay attention to what wants to happen now and take the next natural step. That's all. So if you can keep yourself focused, keep your leader focused on that question, not on, okay, what are the next, what's it going to look like over the next 5 years? Let's roll out the plan. But what's next? Because when you take the next step, you get new data. And that data should inform the step after that. And if it's not aligned with your big plan, now then your plan's out of date. And then you just get this divergence between plan and reality. So it's like the dynamic steering that they talk about, for example, in the holacracy practice. Pay attention to what wants to happen now. Take that next step, gather the data, let that inform you, and then take the step after that, literally one step at a time. That keeps your organization connected to reality, keeps you connected to what's actually going on in the present moment, and enables you to dynamically steer your way through particularly complex and chaotic operating realities like that we have at the moment. And I can tell you it's just going to get even more complex and even more chaotic as we move forward. Corona is the first of many, I should think, of what people call a cascade of crises as we look at climate change and other related issues. So it's critical, this ability to presence yourself and presence your organization in the current moment and ask, what's the next natural step? Take that, gather data again, and then prepare for the one after that. So those are the 12 principles. Luckily, we have a bit of time for some questions and discussion, so I'm looking forward to that. Point you to a couple of things that are going on if you're interested in following up with any of this. We're going to be launching the book, as I said, the end of the month, and there's an event on the 1st of December. If you're interested in more in the large-scale energetics work that I described, how to work with the energetic architecture of organizations and large pieces of nature, there's the energetics course there. And then here's a few sites if you want to follow up on anything else that I'm doing here as well. But let's see if there's any questions and move into a bit of a dialogue.
Sure. Thank you so much, Peter. That was an insightful session. And yes, questions are there and they are pouring in. So we have 15 minutes and we'll start with our questions. So the first question is that an individual wants to know, how do you find stillness?
How do you find stillness?
Yeah.
Well, different people have different ways. First of all, you need to stop. I mean, it seems obvious, but stop doing and just sit for a bit. And obviously there are different mindfulness practices. that you can adopt. Some very, very basic meditation practices that help you find the stillness. Being in nature often helps to quieten the mind. One of the little exercises we do when we're preparing to do energetic work is noticing that in our mind we have what we call an analyzer, which is our fast-moving rational mind. And we do a little trick that always works for me, where you put a sound to it. So it's when it's turning really fast, like a very fast wheel, it's kind of going, ee! And then what you do is you literally slow it down. You go, ee! And it slows the rational analytic mind. And you notice, oh yeah, there's a bit more space now for me to be able to work, more creatively. But to be honest, we're so trained in working with our rational minds that developing a discipline, a practice around a meditation practice, for example, a mindfulness practice of some kind, is really important to doing any of this work, because you can't access any of this unless you're able to find that stillness and be able to connect to the field in that way.
Thank you, Peter. We have another question from Manish. He wants to know, a spiritual bent of mind on the part of the coach seems to be highly correlated with truly transformative coaching. What is your view on this?
So a coach who has a connection to spirituality in some way, that has likely to be more effective with transformational coaching. Is that the proposal?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would say that it's important to always be doing both, to have the inner practice and to be engaging the world. So on the one hand, we have a lot of activists who are out there and are not aware of their inner reality, and then just end up projecting all their inner mess on the world around them. And then you have more spiritual folks who maybe spend their whole time on their cushion and have developed a belief that it's all one big illusion. It doesn't really matter what we do because it's all an illusion, which is also, in my experience, not accurate. So we need to be both engaging the world and engaging with our own practice, because it's as we engage the world that we bump up against ourselves and that we have stuff to contemplate that will help us to evolve. So, but I would agree that, to be an effective coach, having some kind of spiritual practice or discipline will definitely increase your effectiveness, particularly in creating transformation.
Thank you, Peter. The other question is from Rajan. He wants to know, what is the relationship between intention and attention? Mm-hmm. How does that impact individuals' life?
That's a great question. They're the two key elements, because intention has directionality to it and is more of the masculine energy. Intention is where we're wanting to be, essentially. Attention is when you give your life energy to that goal and you pay attention to how things are. So what they found in the Princeton research, for example, the main difference they found between men and women when they were doing the research was that men were very good at the directionality, but they were getting kind of fairly small results. Women were getting bigger results, but not always in the direction that they wanted. So the feminine was kind of amplifying the energy and the masculine was giving it direction. So that's the kind of relationship between intention and attention. Attention amplifies something, it gives it energy. Think of it as attention as giving energy and intention as uploading information. So you, on the one hand, intention is giving information to something and attention is loading it with energy so that it can actually manifest strongly.
Wow, that was simple, still very profound. Thank you. So the other one is, it's more like a thank you note to you, and I would like to read it for you. So it says, thank you. So this is Deepa. She's saying that thank you, Peter, so much. Love the concept of time and simply flow to stay in the present. Any tool or practice can you share from mindfulness perspective? So this is probably her question, and she started with a thank you note. So yeah.
So she's asking about a mindfulness practice?
Yes. Yeah, so any tool or practice can you share from mindfulness perspective?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are many. I mean, probably the best resource I've found is something called Integral Life Practice, that has like like a 2-minute meditation practice, a 10-minute one, a half-hour one. You can find that, for example, on the Ubiquity University site. But a very basic, practice, essentially what it's about in that first stage is, as I say, quieting the mind and just noticing what it is that's arising in your awareness. That's the basic practice. Because what you start to do then is you start to realize, I am not all that stuff that's running around in my mind, because there's something that's witnessing it, right? Which means that your identity connects to the witness of the rational mind. And so you don't get caught up in thinking that you are that rational mind, because obviously we're a lot more than that. And the moment that you do that you just notice all the stuff that's coming up, then that also starts to quieten down, because you're not so caught up in it. And that's, the very basics kind of meditation 101 in a way. You keep bringing yourself back to the breath, just back to noticing things. And we all do, we get distracted, we end up following one of those thoughts somewhere, and then our rational mind kind of gets excited again. And you have to come back again and go, oh yeah, hello thoughts, hello rational mind. Because the moment you say that, the moment you say hello to it, you're not it. Yeah, because you're the one saying hello to it, and you're witnessing it. And that's the key first step in the practice, is to notice that, there is something in you that can have the awareness of the monkey mind, can have the awareness of that rational mind. And then you start to detach from it in a way. And then later on, you come around and re-embrace it. But the first is noticing, oh yeah, I don't have to get caught up in it the whole time. And that's a critical first step.
Yeah, thank you. The other one is for one of the principals, and her name is Kanchan. She wants to know, how does form pan out in practical life?
The form principle. Let me
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a whole domain on geometry and the energy of shape. So I was just looking for that word actually earlier. The practice in China, it's gone out of my head now. The way you arrange your room and your space and everything. You know what I mean, Preeta? Feng Shui. Feng Shui, for example, is the practice that is very conscious about where things are, how buildings are placed, and things like that. So the practical implications are the forms that you're creating. So if there's a difference, if space feels different if it's got 4 walls in a square, or if it's a circle, for example, right? It feels very different. Energy seems to flow differently. Likewise, there are in nature certain proportions that come back again and again, that are called the golden mean or the golden proportion, that are linked to the Fibonacci series of numbers. So if you look at the way trees, plants are designed, even our own bodies are designed, there are certain proportions between the parts that seem to be the natural proportions of life. So when you design a space or even a flyer or something, if it's got those natural proportions in it, then we will feel more energized by them. Names, there's a whole energetics around names, and names having certain numerology to them that give them a certain energy and things. So some of that, if we're fairly intuitive anyway, we'll come up with something and we'll feel that it's right. And that's really the thing to trust, is, does this feel right or not? Without going through the whole kind of numerological analysis of it. If it feels right and your feeling is you think is clear, rather than being something influenced by a pattern from the past, then it's likely to be the right thing. But certainly looking into the geometry, looking into shape and form, also with design of buildings, but also, as I say, even website design and things, influences how people engage with something in a subconscious way. So it's not their rational mind, but it's their instant kind of the energy they get from the site or from the place that it influences. So it is a huge, a huge world. I've got a whole bookshelf on it here. But it is, so it starts interesting to look into Fibonacci, sacred geometry, numbers. And in fact, there was just a little side note here. There's a great book by Jeffrey, his name is called Scale, which shows that the same patterns exist across the world in things like library book loans, internet traffic, growth of countries, growth of cities, that it's not random at all, that actually there's an algorithm underneath it all that predicts how a city grows, predicts how internet traffic's going to flow. And so it looks so chaotic, but actually there's a pattern underneath it all. There's maths underneath it all, remarkably. So being interested in those patterns and those numbers is, it's a piece of it. I'd say, it is a big rabbit hole if you go down it, but it's certainly an interesting piece. Yeah.
Thank you. And talking of patterns, and I was just browsing through the questions. So the question that popped up next is, and I would like to take that one first before we end up. So how can you help an individual move away from past patterns and operate from the future?
Great question. Well, I mean, that's what we might call shadow work. And of course, there are psychotherapists and who make a living out of that. But in my experience, the essence is, so this is why a coach, right, or a therapist is important, because an individual can't see what's in their shadow by definition, right? Can't see what's in the subconscious because they can't be conscious of it. It's some kind of trauma or something they experienced in the past that they can't be aware of themselves. So they need a mirror. And that's the role a coach or a therapist can play, is helping somebody to notice, oh, why you always seem to respond in this way in this situation, or you always seem to say this thing, what's behind that, and help them to reflect on something, that might enable them to bring something into the light that's currently in the shadow. And so the work is really to help them to see things that might have happened in the past, like which have created assumptions in them, or might just be coping mechanisms. When we're kids, we develop all sorts of ways to cope with our reality, to please our parents, or to make sure we don't get bullied, or whatever it may be, to keep us safe. That then becomes an unconscious pattern in ourselves, and we find ourselves showing up in those ways as adults as well. So it's about helping them to see it, and seeing it is the big first step, of course, because then you're kind of, oh, look, I wasn't aware of that. So you're able to bring the light into the shadow, the light of your awareness into the shadow. And then it's about opening your heart to it, actually, and not judging the fact that that pattern is there, but knowing that in the past that happened because, your part of you was trying to help you get through that situation, basically. And so to see that pattern with compassion dissolves the kind of energy of anger or rejection around it, which enables you to bring that piece of yourself that essentially you've split off, right? You said, oh, I don't want that bit. And then when you split something off from yourself, it keeps tugging at you because it wants to come back in. It wants to be reintegrated, and it'll keep kind of doing all sorts of stuff. And you're kind of, why do I show up like that when, it's not really how I want to show up? Because it's a bit of you that's in your shadow that's wanting attention. So the coach can help, you give that attention, bring it into your awareness. Oh yeah, that could actually be true. What you say there. Yeah, because then and then this happened, and oh yeah, that belief, I recognize that now. So the process of integration starts. And it's a very interesting line between coaching and therapy. I mean, pretty you're the coach here, but in a way, it's slightly artificial line, I think, because really what you're doing is, as a coach, you're helping somebody show up with their fullest potential, and bring their passion to a need in the world and make a living, making a positive difference with the whole of themselves as much as possible. Maybe the line is, if that trauma is, really deep or something, that it requires more of therapeutic process to integrate it. But anyway, I hope that helps.
That certainly helps. I'm sure the person would have absorbed the information they wanted to from the answer that you've given. So with this, and considering the paucity of time, I would like to, I would like to end the Q&A session. They are pouring in with a lot of questions. We'll see how we can address them. Maybe we'll reach out to you separately and take your inputs and give answers to the respective audience who have asked these questions. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Peter. It was indeed a pleasure and an honor to have you here and to be here with you on this platform. So thank you so much. And thank you so much to the audience for being so participative and patient. Just a quick request. Yeah, thank you. Just a quick request. We have created a feedback on the virtual attendee hub. If you can just go in, spend time, share your feedback, because conference is going to end at 7:30 today. So we really value your feedback. So whatever it is, please spend some time and give your valuable feedback to us. And yeah, thank you, Peter. It was indeed a pleasure. Thank you.